Uh, um, yeah, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself and how I ended up with Protective Life. So I'm actually originally from Ukraine, so I immigrated to United States in 1995. And we grew up in Bronx, New York. So I have a little bit of multicultural background, moving to the United States as an immigrant. And then we were in New York, and I worked for about 5 to 8 years with New York Life back in New York. And then I got recruited by Protective Life here in Birmingham, Alabama. So Protective Life is a life insurance company, one of the kind of larger mid-tier companies in the United States focused on selling life insurance, annuity products, and we also have an asset protection division focused on vehicle safety and warranty. Throughout my experiences here with Protective, I had an opportunity to work as a liaison with our Japanese parent company, Daiichi. So in 2015, Daiichi acquired Protective Life as they were focused on growth in the United States. And they started a reverse liaison program. So I was relocated back to New York, or actually where I was from, and I spent a couple of years working with them there. So some of this deck will focus on a little bit about Protective Life, a little about Daiichi, and I think a little bit about cultural dexterity and working with different cultures. It would mostly focus on working with the Japanese because all my colleagues in New York were from Japan. Another thing I wanted to mention, I'll go maybe like slide by slide, but if you have any questions, feel free. I think you can ask them during the presentation, or you can save your questions for later. You can always, I'll share my email. You can always email me if you have any questions or need any advice on working with cross-cultural businesses. So I'll be always happy to help. And just a little bit about myself again. Since I'm based back in Birmingham, Alabama. And if you have family or friends who are involved in soccer in Birmingham, I'm also a referee. So I spend a lot of my free time refereeing youth soccer and high school soccer. So you might see me out here in Birmingham on the soccer field as well. All right, perfect transition to the slide here. So a little bit about Protective Life. So Protective Life actually has a lot of history. The company was founded in 1907 here in Birmingham, Alabama. So at this point, it's a little bit over 110 years old. And it's focused on putting customers first and always serving people and doing the right thing. And for its employees, distributors, and its customers, right? So customers always first, and you'll hear this a lot from Protective, I think from a lot of industries today in general, and from Daiichi as well, that customer experiences always comes first. So we have about 3,200, a little over 3,200 employees, which are located all over the country. So we have about 60% of our employees are in the office, and we have offices here in Birmingham, and we have a large asset protection division in St. Louis as well, and another office in Cincinnati. And a lot of our employees are remote, and obviously COVID has kind of accelerated a shift to kind of a combination of people in the office and remote. So here's an interesting, I think, fact here that we paid over $350 million to clients on their in terms of death benefits due to COVID claims. I think that's a pretty big and a pretty large number there, showing our commitment to our customers and our distributors. We have a little bit over $127 billion in assets. Almost $1 trillion. I think it's one of our top goals. I think like this year in 21 is to reach $1 trillion in life insurance coverage, and a little bit over 11.7 million contracts. And we support, we're always big in the community as well. So we support 242 organizations through Protective Life Foundation. And I think, Stacey, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we do some work with Jeff State as well in terms of Life Foundation and doing some, I think, initiatives that we started recently. All right, I think that's good on the Protective Life. I think we can move on to the next one. Cool. Oh yeah, and one, before I jump into the slide, one thing I forgot to mention on the previous slide. So Protective Life has kind of two businesses that shape it, and it's focused on its retail side, selling through life insurance and annuity products, as well as its mergers and acquisitions. So M&A is one of the top qualities of Protective Life, one of the main areas focus of the business. All right, perfect. So as I've mentioned, this is a great overview of Dai-ichi Life Holdings, which acquired Protective Life in 2015. One of the main reasons why Dai-ichi entered into the United States space is decline in population in Japan. So like if you go back to 1990, Japan was 6 out of the large size of the population. And then we transitioned to 2019, the population size, they shifted to number 11. As the demographics in Japan were changing, the people were not having as many kids, people were getting older, so there's a much older population, and they were aging. They wanted to look for opportunities outside of Japan, and they saw Protective Life in the United States as a big growth engine to kind of expand abroad. But they were also very active all around the globe. So Dai-ichi Holdings is a really large corporation. So from the historic perspective, Dai-ichi was established in 1902. It was the first Japanese first mutual insurance company. Today, they have over 65,000 employees worldwide. And as I mentioned, in 2003, they started thinking about expansion, which was driven by secular trends and demographic changes, and aging population. So on the map here, I just wanted to do it quick because I can't really see. But in 2007, the first venture was into Vietnam. As they established Dai-ichi Life Vietnam. In 2008, they expanded into Australia, and they purchased a company called TAL. TAL is actually, I think, number 1 insurer in Australia today. At the same time, they've entered, did a 50-50 agreement with Ocean Life Insurance in Thailand. In 2009, it was a partnership with Star Union Dai-ichi Life in India. And then 2013, Indonesia. And at the same time, in the 2010, the company went from a mutual life insurance company. So they demutualized and introduced their IPO, initial public offering. And in 2015, they obviously bought Protective Life, and that was their first really big venture into the life insurance space in the United States. In 2016, from the corporate perspective, they shifted to a holding company structure to kind of help manage the global businesses at this point that they have expanded over the years. And most recently in 2019, they've started business in a very robust and young countries that have very young population is Cambodia and Myanmar. So they're focused on growing life insurance businesses there as well. So that's kind of the focus of the global expansion of Dai-ichi Life. At the same time, there were changes that were happening domestically in Japan as well. So they have a life insurance, Dai-ichi Life mutual life insurance company, but they also have Dai-ichi Frontier Life. So Dai-ichi Frontier Life is a company that's focused on selling annuity products through the bank channel. So it's kind of thinking about customer and what the customer needs are. So as interest rates in Japan were very low, they kind of ventured into the annuity products and were selling through the bank channel. There was also a need for healthcare products. So in 2015, they introduced domestically Neo First Life, which was another domestic kind of health-focused insurance agency. Okay, next slide. There we go. Perfect. So this slide, I like. Thank you. Each year, and you can pull a lot of this if you go to Dai-ichi's Life parent company, since it's a publicly traded company. A lot of these decks and information is published online as we shared with our shareholders through the investor relations page. So I encourage everybody, after this, you can go to the website and kind of like dig around a little bit about the history of Dai-ichi and about all the investor relations materials that are out there in kind of terms of strategy and what we're thinking. So this is actually the most recent presentation here in terms of the 2023 midterm management plan. So every 3 years, Dai-ichi publishes its midterm management plan, which is focused on goals domestically as well as abroad for the whole Dai-ichi Life group. The big discussion this year is obviously sustainability. Maria I can't even pronounce it, materiality. And then the big statements here is like our ultimate purpose is to support well-being of all sustainable society over the next 100 years, and contributing to resolving material issues through value propositions beyond the insurance domain. And if you look in the bottom of the slide here, you'll see like little squares, and those come actually from the United Nations social responsibility goals. So pretty much when Daiichi sets its strategy and goals, they try to align majority of them with the current United Nations social responsibility goals as well. So as you look, there's like a lot on the slide, but some of the main things that they're focusing on is policyholders, domestic strategy, overseas strategies, financial strategies, and sustainability business foundation. But the main thing here is the vision of the Daiichi Life Group is protect and improve the well-being of all, and that's focused on either it's financial well-being, health being, and sustainability of the society. And on the materiality side, you'll see like some of the goals. You can look through them later, but it's focused on the protection side, the livelihood, stability through insurance, that's promoting the health for all and offering health products as well for customers and employees. Some of the other things a little bit to the right in terms of sustainability for society, the company will be focused on responding to climate change, improving efficiency of energy use, and promoting clean energy, as well as governance and risk management. But again, there's a lot more in detail on the webpage. So I encourage, if you have free time, to go and take a look in the Daiichi's page and see what they have out there. There's a lot. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So a little bit about, so Daiichi, when they acquired us in 2015, they've invited 3 liaisons from Japan to kind of come and live here in Birmingham, Alabama, to help kind of flourish and develop synergies with Protective Life and the Tokyo headquarters. So we have 3 liaisons from Tokyo who are currently in Birmingham, Alabama, working at Protective Life. But as part of that program, they've also started a program where they wanted to invite Protective employees to kind of go work in the regional headquarters in New York, and it was called Reverse Liaison. So I was actually selected. It was like an application program, and then you go through a lot of different interviews at different stages based on your experience. So I was the 3rd Reverse Liaison that was selected from Protective Life to go work in the New York office. So a little bit about the New York office, which is interesting. So it was established in 1975 as Daiichi Life first overseas representative office. So Daiichi Life, even though they've just acquired Protective in 2015, they've been in the United States since 1975. As you can see, it changed a little bit. Taking a look at Times Square, if anybody has been, 1975 to 2020, probably post-COVID, there's a little bit less people there today, but hopefully it's getting back to normal. And originally, the office in New York was established to study and understand the U.S. insurance industry, the economy, and United States financial and regulatory system. Once Daiichi acquired Protective Life, the office in New York turned into the regional headquarters, right? So there was communication to help build synergies between Protective, the New York, and headquarters in Tokyo. So some of the the big thing is, so everybody in the New York office or majority of the people are expats from Tokyo who come and work in New York for a few years and then rotate back to Japan. So the kind of role of the New York office is supporting and collaborating with Protective Life and kind of serve as an intermediary between Daiichi Life Holdings and Protective Life, helping ensure effective and efficient communication between the 2 companies and build as many synergies as possible. And one of the things that us as reverse liaisons were focused in the office is transitioning from a Japanese office working in the US into a diverse working environment where kind of both best practices from the Japan and US working methods and cultures can be combined to create a workplace standard for the Daiichi Life group. So it was kind of like an continuing building synergies and building the best US working practices that I had to the office, as well as learning from my Japanese colleagues. I can probably pause here before we move to the next one, and if anybody has any questions.
Wants to ask a question, you can put it in the chat if you don't want to talk, or you can ask. You can unmute yourself to ask if you want to.
Boris, I have a question.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The technical aspect of this is fascinating. It's a little over my head because it's all about, it's using a lot of business jargon. It's fascinating. It's interesting. Don't get me wrong. Excuse me. And I'm wondering if you could speak very plainly, a little more plainly to something you just spoke of, which is really intriguing, which is two different cultures, Japanese culture, American culture, in terms of societies. And when you said that your company was looking to embrace American society and you were part of that mix, can you talk a little bit, if it doesn't take too much time, about what that was like, the sort of what you learned about or maybe you will, but that's the part I'm really interested in, how you did that and what it was like, what it felt like,
I will. So actually I will. I think the second half, the first one is a little bit, you're right, it's a little bit of a business overview, but the second half of presentation will get into the fun stuff in terms of cultural dexterity and experiences working within different multicultural experiences.
Thank you. And don't get me wrong, I'm actually really intrigued by this business structure. So thank you for that as well.
Yeah. All right. So I'll go through this slide quickly, since again, you're right, it's a little bit business, but this is a big one. So kind of wanted to, this one is important because it shows how both groups over time created vision and values, which are very well aligned. And that's by your side for life from Japan, and always doing the right thing, building trust, serve people, and simplify everything, and kind of the frameworks from Protective Life. And both mission, vision, and values align really well between both companies, where we put people first and being by your side for life. So I think that's the only thing I wanted to mention on that slide.
I think he's moving right into what you want here now, Karen.
Yeah. So the big differences, if you can summarize, this is obviously the summary of the Japanese business culture. So the first one is consensus building. So if you think about business structure in the United States, it's usually how it works, it's top down. And in the Japanese culture, it's bottom up. So there's a lot of consensus building. So a lot of ideas come from the employees on junior levels, and then they discuss their ideas and pitch it to the next layer up. And then there's a lot of discussion and decision making there. And it goes through multiple layers in terms of creating consensus at each one of those layers. So kind of consensus building and multi-layer goes together, very compared to the United States. So sometimes it's good because I think a lot of from the Japanese perspective, from bottom up, you can work out a lot of kinks, and you can find a lot of errors by the time it gets all the way to the top, but it also slows down the process, right? So if you want to get something out to the market quick, or you want to make a quick decision, the consensus building and multi-layer business structure does not work very well. Sometimes, and that's like the big thing where you kind of have to find the middle ground between the Japanese business culture and the United States business culture. So if you have senior leadership like a CEO here, helps drive strategy, and then the junior employees work on it. Sometimes decisions do get done much quicker because you already know what you're working on versus from building bottom up. So I think that's like the multi-layer structure and consensus building, two very big differences between working in the Japanese culture and the United States. Also, seniority is very important, right? So I think it's been changing a lot in Japan, but sometimes people, you would get promoted, whether you're working for Toyota or I guess any organization in Japan. If you're in a position for many years, after so many years, you would get promoted. So you would get promoted based on how many years you work there versus the merit that you put in. I mean, it's probably different, but a lot of it, like the seniority did play a big act. So some people who had merit might have got promoted because they didn't have seniority. It has changed, right? So, but that's originally how the Japanese business structure was structured. In today's modern society, it has changed significantly. So it's obviously based on merit. I'm sure there's still companies out there that seniority is very important, but that's one big thing. Another thing, vague and indirect. So a lot of the discussions that you have with your colleagues, I'm just trying to think of a good example here, but it's just indirect in terms of how the communication is done. So in terms of vague and indirect, I think the Japanese communicate better, let's say through email than speaking to you. So sometimes when maybe they're presenting and speaking, they might not, when they say something, it might not necessarily mean, it might mean two different things, right? So if they give you, let's say, let's say your presentation is really good, they might tell it to you in person, but it doesn't mean it's good. You might still have to do some work on it. So like the vague and indirect plays into a big portion. Again, this is something that has been in society for a long time, but it has changed over time and more into the 21st century. Another big thing is lifetime employment. So we don't have this in the United States. I mean, maybe some companies we still do, but once somebody joins a company in Japan, they would stay with them for the next 30, 40, 50 years with one company. I think, again, this has been changing in the modern society and people are moving from different companies to companies. But historically has been lifetime employment, and that kind of part of the seniority that plays into it as well. That's why if you stay with the company for a long time, you would just automatically get promoted over the years. One interesting thing here I wanted to mention about Daiichi that is also really and is applicable to other Japanese companies is that they do very interesting rotation programs, right? So you can think about my experience sort of as a rotation program when I worked as a reverse liaison in New York, but they would can have somebody in sales, and every 3 years they would start this rotation program where they can move you from sales to marketing, or they can move you from sales to accounting and finance, and then you would have to learn accounting and finance, and that's done every year. An employee stays in that position for 3 years, and then it could be rotated again. So that's a lot of my colleagues in New York. I think they apply to work internationally, but sometimes like they came, they would be sales in Japan, and they would be rotated to New York and work in like corporate planning and finance. So I think that was something interesting. I probably should have added to the list, like rotation programs that are very popular in the Japanese culture across a lot of organizations. And of course, the main thing is neat and precise. I think all the and one thing is always on time, I think, too. So the time, neatness, and preciseness is a big part of their culture. Like I'll tell you, like I've traveled in Japan quite a bit, and when you walk on the street, you don't see. It's probably like Japan is probably the cleanest country in the world. You walk around and there's not a piece of trash on the street. In terms of preciseness, yeah, the presentations, and that kind of goes with consensus building. The work on these presentations for work very thoroughly, and everything is presented very neatly and thought through. Not a lot of errors to be made, and its culture is also on time, right? So the culture is you're always on time for all your meetings. When you travel in like in New York City, you could wait for a subway for 40 minutes and wondering where's this train. When you travel in Japan, all the trains arrive on time, like to the second, whether it's a regular subway or it's a bullet train. So I think that's kind of like some key takeaways here in terms of this. Are there any questions on this? Because I think that this was quite a lot. I
Not
hope that was
yet.
helpful. Okay, cool. All right. So this next one, I just wanted to get a little bit into kind of working and understanding like intercultural dexterity and working with my colleagues in Japanese. So I think the big thing is always it's important to be open to experience new cultures and learn from new cultures. And so here are the top two things that I think are applicable to working with the Japanese are introductions and greetings. So usually the very strict rules when it comes to introductions and greetings. When I worked as a liaison, trying to learn a new culture, as I was learning theirs while they're learning ours. I had a little bit, obviously, of lax there. And a lot of things they did forgive me in the beginning in terms, but it's an interesting thing here is bowing and exchange of business cards. So here's an interesting photo. So this is President Obama in November 2009. He met Emperor Akihito of Japan at the Imperial Palace in Tokyo. Probably not a lot of people know, but this photo of their greeting was a source of some controversy in the United States. And can anybody answer what's wrong in this photo? Why it caused some controversy? Can anybody think of an idea?
I think Americans misunderstand the bowing and consider it subservient. Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, maybe they aren't misunderstanding. Maybe it's just the American perspective of it.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah. No, it's all good. So if you look at the photo, it appears that the president is lowering himself to the emperor while the emperor is perfectly upright. So what happened to President Obama it's a very common occurrence in Japan. Luckily, I knew before I went to work in the office. I was introduced to this photo, so I didn't make this mistake. But so foreign business travelers aren't sure if they should shake hands or bow, and they end up doing both, and that's what President Obama is doing, and that's like a big mistake. So you either and it's called the bow handshake, and there's no such thing as that. So so you always have two options with the Japanese, especially in today's society. You can bow or you shake hands, but you can't do both. And it's funny. So it's called the business traveler's dilemma. So if you were ever traveling to Japan in business, you should try to introduce yourself according to local customs with a 45-degree bow and an introduction. But at the same time, the Japanese are also very accepting. So if you make a mistake, it's okay as well. So this is actually, yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, if any of you are interested, there's actually an hour-long Japanese etiquette video on our international presentations page that was done for International Education Week last year. And it's about all of that. It's about being an American in Japan and some of those cultural things. But you can watch it on our international presentations page. I'll share that when I send out the email to everybody later if you're interested.
Awesome. Yeah.
You might want to watch it too. Let's see what you think.
Yeah. So it's I'll just have a couple things here about this one. So the normal perception of bowing is you would see like in the movies like Karate Kid, where it's a full bow and hands in front and you hold it for a few seconds, but that's not actually accurate. You probably in the training videos you won't see that as well. It's pretty much when bowing in Japan, you show the respect for the person or thing you're bowing to, and to humble yourself in their presence. In other than business situations, bowing is scheduled normally small and can range from a full 45-degree bow to a simple nod of the head. So one of the actual interesting things I've seen during my travels in Japan, I know like when I was traveling, somebody was making a purchase at a car dealership, and when the person who bought the car was driving off, the salesman was bowing nonstop till the person completely was off the parking lot and holding that I think almost like a more than a 45-degree bow. So it's as it's mentioned, it's a pretty big sign of respect in Japan. Okay, next slide. So business card exchange, or it's called in Japanese meishi, which is an essential must-have item in Japan. So if you're ever traveling for business in Japan, you must have your business cards with you if you're in a business environment. And the initial exchange of the cards, the internal meetings in Japan are relatively informal, but if you're meeting with external companies, they always involve introductions. So you have to stand up and you actually line up, and they do it in seniority. So the meetings that I've had with my CEO, like, so let's say we had a meeting with an outside client, and it was my CEO in New York, and then like our chief person in charge of finance, and then me. So that we would go in order. So the CEO would walk up first, then chief finance person, and then me as a junior employee. And you introduce yourself with a slight bow, and you offer your business card. You say your name and your position, and the card has to be facing forward, so the person you're introducing to can see your title and your name, and they acknowledge the card, and then you move exchanging the cards from person to person. So let's say we were meeting with a group of 5 people, so we had to do the same introduction to every person that we were meeting with. And the two-handed card handling is also, right, it's very important. So you present and accept cards with 2 hands, and this is considered a humble gesture. And you make sure that your card is presented with Japanese side, right side up. So if you had, like I had a card that had both. On one side it was Japanese, and the other side was English. So when I was meeting with my clients or vendors who were English, I would give them the English one. When in Japan, I was meeting with the Japanese colleagues, I would give them the Japanese side. And another thing that's very important is the respect of cards. So once you take the card from a person you're meeting with, you don't put it in your pocket. You sit down for the meeting and you lay out the cards next to you throughout the whole duration of the meeting. And at the end of the meeting, that's when you put them away. So it's very important to show that you've read the card and analyzed it as a sign of respect. And then you keep them next to you throughout the whole meeting, and then you put them away at the end of the meeting. And I'm sure there's a ton of this covered in the video.
She was more talking about if you go as a student. So, but it's still there a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so I think if you go as a student, I mean, I think it would be nice to have a business card. I don't think you necessarily need it. But I think if you're meeting, like if you go as a student, I think, or an exchange program, it'll be worth having a business card, but I'm sure they're obviously very understanding, right? So they might give you their business cards, and if you don't have one, so that's okay too. Okay. Some of the key takeaways from global business success, that this is kind of like my own personal, I think, key takeaways. I think networking. So I've used opportunities here, Protective Life, just in general in the life insurance industry, because I've been in it in a while, and with my Japanese colleagues to keep networking, make friendships, and that opens the door for unique interactions. Empathy is very important. So I think you have to be open, have your heart open to different cultural experiences, and kind of awkwardness that you might face in different situations. I think, and it might be, whether it's in Ireland, it might be in Japan, I think it's anywhere. I think empathy is a big part of working in multicultural society. I think demonstrating a small knowledge of Japanese culture and traditions reflects a genuine interest and success of the relationship. But again, might not just apply to Japanese. I think it can apply to any culture where you're going to be working on. Understanding your audience, I think, is key. So if you think about it, the Japanese like to communicate a lot through presentations. And you've seen some slides here that are very busy and full. So it might be easier for them to communicate through writing rather than speaking. So you have to be acceptable to how your audience communicates with you, and have a cultural mindset, right? So I think the big thing about it is attitude. You have to be receptive to new experiences and differences, challenge assumptions, avoid quick judgment, remain patient, and be a continuous learner. I think so. Some of those key, and I think some of that comes through, like, I think a lot of these things summarize the context of what is called cultural dexterity, and using emotional intelligence when you work with multicultural environment. And I think another thing, like if you are working with Japanese or maybe another culture where you can adjust your mindset from an individual performer to a team-based culture. Sometimes it's harder for some people, but you have to be open to that. And then the final slide here, this is just a fun slide. I've had a lot, luckily I had an opportunity to travel to Japan during my time in New York, experience the cuisine. So that's the other thing, you have to be open to experiencing different cuisine, which is in Japanese could be very interesting. And you kind of work hard, play hard ethic. The Japanese are very hard workers, but they always play harder than other days. So you got to come in with a very hard work ethic, and then you work hard, play hard. And then it's important to create those relationships through networking.
Boris, we have our first chat question.
Yes.
Here, have there been any challenges with language barriers?
Yes. Right. So there could be, and I think that's kind of comes down to how you communicate. So sometimes when you let's say give a presentation, and the listener, who could be a Japanese, doesn't really understand or what I'm saying, they would always come back in writing. So I think that's kind of like the communication. So you have to be open. So if you're communicating through a presentation or a deck, they might not ask you a question there, but they can communicate in writing. So it's easier, I think, for the Japanese to communicate through writing because they can express themselves better. Not everybody, but some people. And I think that's how you get across through some of these language barriers. But today, if it's a casual conversation, you can always pull up the Google Translate and kind of get around it with that as well.
Well, are there other questions from anybody? Because I think that is the end of our deck of slides. Or is there anything else you can think of, Boris?
I'm trying to think. I was hoping there'd be more questions. I'm only prepared for about 40 minutes to speak.
Okay, I think I saw a hand coming from Karen.
Yeah, I've got a lot of questions today.
Awesome.
Okay.
Great presentation,
All right.
Boris. I'm wondering if there was anything that was a difference, something was culturally new for you that you had difficulty or maybe even didn't like having to change about yourself, because that's what we have to do, right? With different cultures, we have to learn to meld to some extent. So I was just wondering if there was anything about the Japanese culture in business that you found irritating at first or difficult that you actually wound up liking after you learned how to practice it, like a change that you had to make that you found difficult that you actually found that you enjoyed once you started doing it later afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a great question. Thank you. So I think I'll give a good example. So I worked on a project where there was probably, if it was done in the United States, it could have been done, like I mentioned, a lot faster because we already had direction from the top. But because we're a consensus, there's a lot of groups in the cookie jar. So I had to go through a lot of different layers in New York and in Japan where people were making decisions, which slowed down the process a little bit. And I think where you can get comfortable, because at the end, I understood that even though it took longer time to complete this project, it was done very precise. It was done very well. Yes, it could have done quicker, but we might have missed something. And I think you kind of have to, in some situations like that where it didn't really have to be rushed, it was okay. I mean, it would have been great if it was faster. But the slow decision-making process probably actually helped the project more than if I would have done it just like in 2 days and call it a day, whether it dragged on for a few months because there was just so much decision-making involved.
Here's the plan, right?
Thank you.
I have a chat question. Have there been any challenges with food in terms of dietary concerns when invited out for a meal by a host? Example, not eating meat or vegetarian. I also think in terms of alcoholic consumption may also be a question to ask about too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, so me personally, I was experiencing eating everything and front of me, but if you do have dietary limits, I think you can just let your host know ahead of time. Japanese are very accepting, very friendly, and they absolutely understand, and they will work to get you whatever you need. So a great example, we had some meetings in Japan, and they would ask us ahead of time what our dietary needs were and like what we needed. Because some people I was part of the global leadership committee, and we had people coming from every country, right? So we had colleagues from India and Indonesia who are vegetarians. So we always had to have vegetarian meals prepared for them in Japan, or the restaurants we went to needed to have vegetarian dishes on the plate. So the Japanese are very thoughtful, and they're great hosts, and always make sure that everybody feels welcome. So you would never have an issue in terms of the dietary needs, or nobody will ever make you eat something you don't want to. And I think the same applies to alcoholic beverages. Yeah. The work hard, play hard culture does apply to the Japanese. There is definitely in Japan. But nobody will ever ask you to drink if you don't want to.
There's another question. I'm interested in building cross-cultural competency for employment. What experiences, associations, or professional preparation can students seek out to build marketable skills and social proficiency?
Wow, great question. I think I got to think about this one because it's funny because I came into this role really without any special financial preparation. I just came in kind of with an open heart, and I did have insurance experience, which helped. But I think just learning about different cultures, whether it's like, I know you've mentioned you had a course, 1-hour course. I think that will give you a heads up. I think being a curious, is that?
I think we just lost you a little bit, Boris. Can you? Oh, there you go. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it dialed me back. I apologize. Yeah. So and I think just being just in general, a curious learner. Like maybe if you're interested for working, you have a company in mind that you're interested in. And it's a publicly traded company. You can get a lot of resources about it online. So you can always, like for like Daiichi, you can always go online and read everything about the company so you're well prepared and well versed in some of the general business overview and maybe some of the corporate structure. Another recommendation I would make is maybe even, which I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So you can maybe friend some people on LinkedIn and tell them that you're a student and you're curious working in a multicultural corporation abroad, and maybe just friend some people and ask their opinions as well. I think like building that network, I think, is important, even through LinkedIn, right? So you just message somebody in Italy or Germany or Japan, and I'm sure people will be very receptive coming and meeting students.
There are some local resources that you can tap into. Here in Alabama, we have the Japanese American Society of Alabama. JASA actually does programs open to students where they actually have business etiquette classes where you practice passing your business card and some of the things that Boris was mentioning. They also do language practice tables. So if you wanted to learn Japanese and you're trying it on your own for now, because we don't teach it at Jeff State, but if you wanted to get started, there are programs where you can kind of start jump-starting your resources. The Alabama Virtual Library has free language resources for you to practice, and then you could try to do things through some of the language tables. I mean, that's just for Japanese, but there are equivalencies with the German-American partnership. There's Alliance de Française, if you're interested in French. So there's local resources. And I don't know what they are for California, but I can help anybody that's in the Alabama pool to make some connections if you are specifically interested in building that piece of things. So.
Thank you, Stacey.
It looks like we have another. There has to be a comparable society locally separate from language studies. Are there any recommended major studies one might pursue? There was a mention of emotional intelligence. So I think area studies was one of the things that you mentioned, Boris, or linguistic studies. What else could be beneficial to students who want to work in a business environment and work internationally?
Yeah, I think there's always, like, especially if you're in a business school. So my background, I was a political science major, right? So I had a pretty good background in terms of kind of global view of what's happening from the political science side. So I think some political science courses are always helpful in terms of learning about different global economies. It gives you a good, like, macro overview of the world. And then, right, there's a ton of business courses which are focused on international relations, global business. So I think I'd highly recommend taking, I think I've taken a couple, I have an MBA from Northeastern, so I know I've taken a couple global focused international relations classes. So I think there's some of that you can take in your undergraduate, as you move through your undergraduate degree.
Some of the courses, at least at our community college, that are available, you might consider would be like world religions that occasionally are offered, macro and microeconomics, intro to business incorporates an international intro to the concept of international business. There's also things like world history, cultural anthropology, world literature. Those are things that are offered all the time that you could incorporate and start building your foundation of some of the things that you're interested in, because you got to start somewhere. And when you get onto the bachelor's level, the opportunities of the coursework are a lot more varied. But you do have options within the community college that are at least good foundational courses, as he was saying. Anybody else have questions? Karen, you know you have another one. Go ahead. It's just, I can see it on your face. Go ahead. No? Okay.
I do have a question. Boris, how hard was it for you to learn all this? Like, how many years did you spend learning the insurance business and how it works? And then second,
yeah, go ahead.
Daiichi, if I'm probably not saying it right, that's a really different business model than I've seen here in America. I mean, a lot of lip service is paid, in my opinion, towards making the customer first and taking care of them. But this whole approach of taking care for life or being a partner for life, that really stood out for me as being very different. And I wondered if that's a cultural thing or if it's just a business line, to like, is that real? Is that how that company really works?
Yeah,
actually,
yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Selena's question in the chat is very similar to that, Karen. So I kind of want to ask it before you answer it for us, because I think that'll expand what you're asking. Because she's saying, do you think other U.S. companies would benefit from the Japanese way? Not a lot of people stay at a job for a lifetime. What are those qualities that U.S. businesses should take into account? So I think that kind of mirrors Karen's question very beautifully. So
yeah, it's very, very interesting. Yeah, so I think in general it is a cultural thing, right? So being by your side for life, being a life insurance company. So it's both. It's for Daiichi and Protective Life. The business itself, it's kind of being in the life insurance, but right, we pay death claims. So we pay the benefit. We pay a death claim when somebody passes away at the most difficult time. So I think that's kind of when it comes to consumer first mentality, because we are the sale process itself, it's fine, but it's at that time of need when Daiichi around the globe and here, a protective life, paying the death benefits at the time of need, the most challenging time for the family, always puts customer first. So I think that's kind of like the foundation of it all. So in terms of that, I think like it's very similar for protective life and Daiichi, partially because of the business that we're in the life insurance industry. Customer first is kind of the foundation, and being by your side for life. I fell into the life insurance industry. It was like I just joined randomly I just applied for a job and got into it. It was during the financial crisis. So I kind of fell into it by luck, and I've stayed in it. I love it. Love here in Birmingham, the people that I work with and my Japanese colleagues as well. So I kind of just fell into it by pure luck. There was no anything specific behind it, but it is life insurance in the United States. It's probably one of the largest employers, right? There's over 600, I think, life insurance companies in the United States today. So it's one of the largest employers in America. And then the other question was in terms of yes. So I think the Japanese culture has a lot of very unique business kind of standards that could be applicable to the United States, but best is probably kind of having a balance of both. So I think like the decision-making process could work really well in the United States. It could be brought here in some situations. So yeah, and there's a lot of things like lifetime employment was a thing back in the day. I think it's fine. It's interesting because I think we here at Protective Life, we have employees who have stayed with the company for a long time. So you can pretty much consider that lifetime employment. We have people at Protective who've been with the company for 40, 50 years. So like an insurance is also like, think about life insurance as a business where you pretty much enter and then you kind of could stay in it for the lifetime of your career. And then I think one thing that I really liked about the Japanese culture that could be more applied here in the United States is the rotational program, right? So some companies have it. I don't think it's as widely as popular as in Japan, where the rotations are, where you can go from sales to marketing, from marketing to finance, because it gives you a really good broad overview and experience within that corporation. So we have a small rotation program at Protective, but not to the scale that our parent company Daiichi Holdings has. So I think bringing that kind of cultural mindset in terms of rotations and being comfortable putting people in different areas of the business and just letting them flourish is very cool and unique. So I think that's one thing that I would love to bring to the United States, to the companies that currently don't offer that.
Are there any other questions? I know there's a new one in the chat I just got. I wish more insurance companies were for the customer first, because some people have to fight for certain compensations. And the insurance companies make it hard for people to get what is owed, like in disasters where their homes have been destroyed and it's taking years to get anything. So I think she likes the people first motto of Protective.
Yeah. Thank you. We're not in the I think, right. And I think it's pretty applicable to Alabama as well, and some other California, very applicable to California, right, with all the wildfires. We're not in the property and casualty business, so we have a pretty good putting customer first success, I think. But it's a good question, yeah. I think we're all faced with working with some other different P&C companies with disaster recovery and stuff. Yeah, I could see where the question.
Well, Boris, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really grateful for the time that you've given us and the insight into your experiences. We really greatly appreciate